Okay, let's see. I was having like really deep thoughts, and I think I kind of came to a conclusion of like years of meditation. I don't know how many years, it's at least 10. And I've just been deep thinking about things, and I had some interesting epiphanies. It's kind of mind numbing even to talk about, just because it's so, like, I guess some ideas, they come really close to madness. When even when they make sense, it's almost like overwhelming, too much for your brain to handle. And this idea was about that. It kind of pushed me to my edge in perception. I mean, to really understand. And I don't think I do. I just think I have like an awareness. Let me give you some background first. Uh, what we're going to be talking about, or what I'm going to talk about, is the collective but singular consciousness that all of us have. And that probably doesn't make much sense and seems really metaphysical, but the way I'm going to explain it, hopefully it's not. To give you a little bit of background, I have my highest level of education is a master's degree, but it's in writing fiction. And my primary degrees are actually in healthcare. They're in the field of nursing. And I've worked for 27 years. I'm in my 27th year as a registered nurse. And so a lot of my comparisons and ideas are going to kind of reflect that sort of medical thing. And this is not to say that this is anything really scientific. Philosophy just means to think, and it's the process of thinking. And some thoughts are not necessarily, they can never really be science. It's like trying to measure 2 cups of anger. We know that the emotion exists. We know that it affects things, that I can actually be angry and throw a cup down, and people can see the cup and they can have an idea that someone was angry. They can read that emotion from the action, even though it's past, which is a kind of interesting phenomenon. But scientifically, that's really difficult to explain. It's not like you can write an equation 2 plus 2 equals the anger was 6, therefore the cup was broken. There's no way really to do that. And everybody, when they handle an emotion like that, like if I had an amount of anger, I might be able to bear more than someone else and much less than another. And so it's a very strange thing, and our reactions may be entirely different in how we vent and voice that anger, some of which would be acceptable, some of which wouldn't. So this is kind of how you can see how these ideas start to get complex really right away. And so trying to break down something like consciousness becomes a problem. Like what is it? How are we here? But again, I had a breakthrough today, and I think I can. So bear with me, and I don't know if I want like a bunch of comments and things. I think if people have ideas and stuff, I think expressing them is good. I'm probably not going to read them. I think that that's for you, because this isn't something that can be proven here or there. I mean, it's like anything else, just people wrestling with trying to understand something that's very difficult to actually put a finger on. And so, the part one is actually that we're going to look at organ donation. And we're going to look at 2 facets that happen in the hospital with your cells. And so the first thing we're going to look at is actually donating blood. When you donate blood, your blood has parts of it that are alive, like in particular the immune cells. Some of those are screened out. The red blood cells are alive, but they don't have a nucleus, or I believe it's a nucleus. And so, but they're essential in transporting oxygen, and then there are other proteins and other things in your blood. And so this is tissue within you that is alive to a degree, and you could argue that it is entirely. I mean, because blood is composed of different things. The main thing that is the most alive would be the immunity, and that mostly is screened out, but not entirely. And so, because sometimes transfusions happen for immunity, so like a bone marrow transfusion is actually sometimes done to give someone some immunity. When you get a blood transfusion or a bone marrow transfusion, you're receiving part of somebody else's body, and it's alive in you. It was alive in them, it's alive in you. This is something that happens. Okay, no disagreement about that. You're still alive, but part of you is alive in someone else. So we're going to look at organ donation in particular. And so now we're looking at one, and I want to focus on a type of organ because you can donate your eyes. And if I donated a cornea, would cause blindness, but I could give my cornea to another person. It would be alive. It was alive in me. Now it's not, and it's alive in the donor recipient. So if I took something like my heart, well, if I take it out of me, I'm dead. But even though I'm dead, it's alive in someone else. The one I want to focus on is the kidney because I have two of them. All people do, mostly. I mean, it depends if sometimes people are born with one kidney or even no kidneys. So if I have two kidneys and they're both healthy and I'm compatible with somebody, I can donate one kidney to the person who needs it, and my kidneys are alive in two people, not just one. And so I have tissue that's alive in another person. And so when we're looking at consciousness, the idea that I was coming to was as a collective. And so when there are different parts, right? So we mostly just think brain as consciousness. And then, there are other organs that actually can affect consciousness too. But let's look at the brain right now. So you have a neuron. A neuron is a very single-celled, what makes our brain work. We also have tissue that actually supportive tissue that kind of like holds it together in the brain. Generally, they just refer to that tissue as parenchyma, which is just surrounding tissue. And then you can have clusters of neurons. Now, the clusters of neurons, they actually form regions. And so like my left ear, right around here, this is where most of the speech, being able to form the words and understand them, actually happens right here, like your left ear temple, right? It's just right there. That's the Broca and Wernicke center. And so those two things are responsible for that. Those neurons, when they work together, have language. Now within those areas, there's one of them that is responsible for knowing what the word cat, right? And it's friends with the visual, and it's friends with the olfactory, and it's friends with the sensation, like the softness of a cat, the claws. Those specific neurons die, the one that recognizes the word. Well, now my ability to express that word is gone. The one that actually has the memory of the cat, well, that's gone. The ability to see a cat, if that dies, well, that's gone. My perception is based on the ability of these things to work together. And as they work in a region, individually, I have a little spark and a little bit of it working together. In a region, a lot more. And then the sum, right? My whole brain working. This goes on with other organs. And so the heart, I'm going to bring this up because, we would think that everything's self-contained, right, in the head, because like the perceptions and things, electrical impulses, the central nervous system and the brain is what's actually controlling that. The central nervous system is the wiring that's putting all the input. But something like a heart, if my heart is injured, then that affects my behavior. My behavior actually I'll start to get depressed, I'll start to be sad, I'll start to have like negative feelings. It'll change the way that I'm able to process. So what I'm getting at with this is that consciousness is a collective. And if I took out a brain cell from this side, just like if I took out a kidney, I can keep it alive in a petri dish. But let's say my consciousness was 100 because I had 100 neurons. Well, now one of them's gone and they're 99. And so who I was is no longer who I am, but I'm mostly the same. But it's not just one little thing. It's the sum of these cells acting together. So if we take something like a stroke, where a part of my brain dies, I become a different person. I'm not the same one. But it's never an individual thing. It's never singular because it's all these cells that are working together to create this singular consciousness. And all of these cells individually are all alive. They all individually have their own little expressions, their own little states of being, but they're connected to the whole. and their connection to the whole is causing it to, I'm trying to think of the words, the connection to the whole are causing it to be like for the greater good. They're all working together, and I'm not doing this by accident. They're all working together towards that common goal. So we have the broad everything leading to this hierarchy, like a pyramid. And so I wanted to go through some other, another idea. It's really important. And so this idea is actually called mirroring. And so what mirroring is that when I can't understand something, and I'm sure there are other ideas in science, mirroring is just my term. The term that I used also for this same thing in the past, just in my own thoughts, it's not an official term, but there are official ones in psychology, there are official ones in science. The other one I called was duality. And so the idea is that things are a reflection. And so I could take something that is known and take something similar that is unknown, and I could point out points, and then by looking at the known, I can determine the unknown. It can give me the blueprint to fill in the dots. And so this kind of comes from an idea that's called homeostasis. And so when we look at all these individual cells, even though they're all part of us, they're all a little bit different. So a heart cell is not a kidney cell, it's not a bone cell, it's not a muscle cell, it's not a neuron, right? It's not a blood cell. But these are all pieces of me that are alive in their way, working together, a collective, forming a singular. So with this idea, one of the radical ideas is that, radical things from this, and it's not really so radical, but it would be more appropriate to refer to myself as they, them, and we, not because of any sort of gender preference, but because that's closer to reality of what I am. I am a colony of cells, and actually a colony of different organisms too, but we'll get into that. So in homeostasis, all these things are working together. They're working together for the common good so that my body can stay alive. And each one in doing that is also trying to be its best life. You know, the bone cell's trying to be its best bone cell. And so what we see, biology gives us this, has analyzed this, and they have this term for it. They call it homeo, which just means human, stasis, to be alive. Homeostasis, keeping alive. And so what happens is that in the universe, this is kind of like a law of thermodynamics. An object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. Well, if I'm actually alive, I take effort and work, and that actually helps keep me alive. They call that Krebs cycle. It's a conversion of adeno-triphosphate, which is a chemical. It converts to adeno-diphosphate. With these Legos, stacking them, unstacking them, actually gives us energy. And it's one of the fundamental things that keep us alive. Our breathing, our circulation, our metabolism are all based on this idea of keeping alive. In healthcare, you look at squiggles. And what squiggles are patterns of watching this. So if I watch someone breathe, I'll see a pattern with the breath. Each breath, it'll be within a certain parameter to be alive. And if things go bad, it's like an absolute value. On one side, the negative, like it's failing, it'll stop. On the other side, before it's failing, it'll actually speed up. But I don't want either. I don't want too fast. I don't want too slow. I want just right within that spot. Just like with your heart, with your values of the chemicals in you, with the amount of cell distribution. So this becomes really important and complex. These different things, these layers of parts that need to be in certain ratios in order to exist correctly. And so I actually drew this idea out of duality. And again, it's like a pyramid where you have the collective working towards the whole. And so we have the positive side, right? All the cells working towards the higher aim, right? And then the negative side, the degradation to entropy. And so entropy is the state of where nothing's happening, nothing's going on. It is actually quite literally death. It's what homeostasis fights. But this is not it's just singular to physical. And so, like, there can be a death of spirit, there can be a death of initiative, there can be a death of drive, there can be a gradual degradation with age, or like loss of ability. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that, again, as I get older, every day after a certain point, I have so many neurons that die. And so my brain was 99 one day, now it's 97. Now it's 98, or 90. Now it's 84, now it's 73. And over time, there's a slow, gradual decline. And so, a 90-year-old is not as fast as he was when he was at his peak. And so we start to see these things. So with the duality, with this sort of thing, with consciousness, we're looking at how all the sums of us actually make this unified perception of how I'm interacting in the world. And so the thing that I know, and it's kind of like things in nature tend to almost, it's like, I don't know, it's because we're part of nature. It's like we're manifesting. And I don't know if the reason why I say manifesting, I know it's a strange word, but when we look at rhythms and patterns, we're not the only ones who have the same rhythms and patterns. And so a lot of music, it's basic, sound is a wave, right? But those waves actually can correspond to emotions, to an alphabet, to a language of emotions that can be communicated universally to a human. And so in nature, if I look at the way a tide is, a lot of people's vacation hotspot, the beach that they want to go to, that beach has a calm and soothing pattern, like a baby sleeping. And that actually, the environmental push, induces that state on me. It makes it harder for me to hold on to chaos because the world around me, that stronger rhythm, is pushing in a gentle rhythm relative to our species, right? And so when we look at things, we kind of mirror that. And so the question becomes like, am I breathing like the tide? Did the tide teach me to breathe? Did it teach me to relax? I don't know. I don't know how answerable that is. But we also start to reflect these patterns, like, again, in music. If I had music and it was soothing music, I'd be willing to bet that the rhythm is a little more like the tide of a calming ocean wave than the silence and then explosive thunder of a stormy night. And so from here, I had to take down notes again because this is a lot to just hold in. And so things happen in the small and then they happen in the big. And so there's kind of like a ripple effect. If I throw a rock in the water, the rock, when it first hits, makes a splash, which is different than anything else. And then there's ripples. The splash is a displacement. We see the upper displacement, but there's a lower displacement too that we're not seeing because we're on the one plane, either under the water or over it. Very seldom between the planes. And that's also important because with these sorts of ideas, because they're metaphysical in nature, and all metaphysics means is that we are trying to explain something that can be explained really scientifically. And usually those type of explanations are more emotional explanations, like the question of why are we conscious? Does it need to be asked? Should it just be a Rene Descartes thing? I think, therefore I am? Probably. But underpinning the why is important to many of us. So the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to go through like the different parts, and we're going to compare the collective consciousness to parts in which it mirrors actual society. So things that we build actually mirror our collective consciousness. This is sort of like the man in the mirror syndrome, where subconsciously, without a doubt, we're making things to be more human. And we're making them more human in ways that we barely recognize. But if there was another intelligence, something that wasn't human. It would recognize that we're imprinting our drives on things. And so I'm hopefully by explaining like the parts of us, and how they relate to parts of our society, this will make sense. And how these are contributing to our consciousness. So we'll start with the brain. And the brain is like the executive leadership part. It's what makes the decisions for the most part. It has most of the autonomy, but not all of it. And so, like spinal cords, fight or flight, those are reflexes that I can have to, startle, to stay alive. They need to happen. That's so quickly that the brain can't respond to it. And so they happen, they have like permission to just go on their own. So startle reflex is like that, right? There's a threat perceived, but before I'm even aware, I'm responding in a hopefully protective manner, right? Your heart does something similar, right? And so I'm trying to think of like another part. Your digestive system, it's just like keep on churning, right? You don't have to be aware that you're digesting the food, right? And then your heart, right? I mean, it doesn't need to be told to beat every time. It's like has a little bit of responsibility. I'll make this decision. You can do this. And so the heart itself, we're shifting organs, right? And we're not looking at it actually acting like leadership, even though it does have some properties. We're looking at it at what it kind of like, the emotional meaning of what a heart is, right? I mean, and so love, disappointment, language. I think language, it creates a sense of community, right? And so if we compare the heart to society, languages bind us, they glue a society together. Food is similar. So if we look at food, not only does it nourish, even though it's kind of digestive tract, it actually also helps unify and keep it together. Family, love, values, these sorts of things, right? The heart, in a way, represents. And I'm not new in saying this. I mean, this has been mapped out. And if anything, this was the given science for years. And this is the associative value, the emotional meaning of parts of our body. And so the emotional meaning is subjective by definition. It's not an absolute. And so, but there are commonalities. There are commonalities across cultures. If I explain heartbreak and that kind of empty pit in the chest from your heart, that disappointment, it's basically a type of cardiomyopathy called takisubo, where it affects your heart's ability to work. And takisubo is an extreme state. It's the macro, the big one, versus the micro. I'm just upset because someone was mean to me that I liked. But we're seeing how this is affecting the whole. Now, my heart is only part of me, but the fact that it's something separate than this and it's working together, so I have two parts that are creating a unified whole. And that's if we're just looking at the general, like the bigger, like the country level, not specific region on the heart, but the whole thing. And, the blood, the bones, all these things are interacting. And so the immune system is another one, right? The immune system, if we look at the immune system, it's what's protecting our body. Our body is in a state of immigration. We have legal residents and we have illegal residents. The legal residents are our flora. And so on our skin, there are these little organisms that live in our glands. And we get them when we breastfeed. And they live in our oil glands. And they come out at night and they mate, but they're these little, like, I think they're arachnids, but they're little, like, and tiny things in our pores. Then they eat our sebaceous oil. But they are in a symbiotic relationship. A symbiotic relationship is a relationship that helps. The opposite relationships would be an infection, which is like kind of like a hospital takeover, and a parasitic relationship, which is a relationship where the organism tries to coexist, but it's coexisting, sucking the blood at the expense, like a leech. And so just be aware that some of the things that are making decisions in our body and are working in our body are actually not us. And so there's a whole, it's like a whole zoo of single-celled organisms in our gut that maintain health. It's our enteric flora. Enteric just means gut. Flora just means like the life that lives there. But if you think probiotics, it's the probiotics that people buy, like kombucha and stuff, that they need in their digestive tract in order to digest food. But those things are not us. They're things that live with us, that coexist with us, that have that symbiosis. And so, moving on along and going back to the immune system is like the personal security. Its job is to recognize what should belong and what doesn't. And it exists in places where generally it's supposed to be bacteria free as much as possible. And so with bacteria free, when I have bacteria or some sort of, I shouldn't say bacteria, should be not free of anything that's any cells that are not me, right? And so they're immigration free zones. And so there are parts of me where if I got in my ear and I had a bunch of bacteria, well, I'd get an ear infection. And those guys would be like Pac-Man, they eating. And they grow and they grow, so there's 1, and now there's 2, and now there's 64, and now there's 2,000, and now, but they're just eating me. They're attacking me at my expense, this infection. And the difference between parasitic and infections, that parasites want to linger as long as possible. But most infectious stuff is like a hostile invasion. It's like a war. They're just trying to eat you, trying to consume you, trying to take resources. And so it's your immune system's job to fight that, just like a security force for a nation. And it can actually go to war. And it can escalate to a small thing. I have a pimple, an inflammation, a red area, to where it's a little bit more serious when now I have a fever, and it's even more, it's like a regional conflict now because it's more serious. But now it's even worse. Now it's war, and now it's world war. And so when it's full-blown, like all bets are off, they call that sepsis. And that sort of life-threatening state where I have to beat this infection at all costs, and I'm going to take all these major swings. That's why it becomes so dangerous to survive from, because it's an all-out fight against things at your own expense, against an infection at your own expense. And it's your immune system that's responsible for that. But that immune system is acting like a police force. So I'm just getting over a flu, and I had an infection, and what my body did is that it kind of gradually shut itself down and demanded rest so that I could prioritize my energy, my body's resources, my collective's resources to fighting that infection. And it worked because I've gotten better. I went from being so affected by the infection that I was having a hard time functioning, and my function is gradually restoring as my immune system's winning the war. Then we look at things like muscles. Muscles are the workforce, right? It's kind of like what gets things done. The factory workers, 9 to 5 people, right? Strange that all these things are parallels, right? We have blood vessels, supply chains, right? The bloods are, it's like the highways, the cars that are delivering what needs to be delivered to here and there, removing the waste. We do have a waste system, right? Sanitation. It's right there. All right, I'm just looking at my notes. And so when we're looking at infection, right away what we see is that we need immigration. We actually need the right bacteria on us to help us, and they affect us. There have been a lot of recent pushes in modern medicine to actually classify the mesentery and actually the digestive flora as an organ, because they are so essential in your health that they might as well be an essential organ. If you don't have the right bacteria on you, that can be just as life-threatening as if your heart is not working, right? And again, that's what probiotics are about. It's about getting this done. And so One of the interesting wild cards of this, and something else to really think about, is that there are other factors that are actually changing consciousness and time, right? So consciousness always is all these states and all these cells. And so if I have a happy brain, a brain that's actually being well fed, right, that's going to affect what my consciousness is. If my brain gets sick, well, that consciousness is affected. It could be my foot, it could be my toe, it could be an infection, it could be my ear, it could be the loss of an arm. All these things are actually affecting, and they're forming a singular, right? I have a multitude, it's billions of stuff that's actually creating a singular consciousness. And to me, that's absolutely fascinating that we have so many creatures in this existence that in this life on the planet that actually do that. So I was going to bring in some wild cards about things that actually affect that consciousness by changing. And so aging does, right? I mean, so when I'm 2, my consciousness is different than when I'm 20. It is different versus when I'm like 82, right? And so over time, my consciousness changes. And this is giving that I didn't have any sort of physical thing happen, because physical things affect, right? If I'm hit by a bat, if I have an event happen, like I'm exposed to more sunlight, that actually is going to affect. I mean, it's not, it may not, it could be like game changing, but it may just be a gradual effect. So, like the tanning of my skin, being exposed to more sunlight. We have things like seasonal affect disorder, where some people are so sensitive to a change in something like sunlight, and it isn't some people, it's most people, that being deprived of sunlight actually mentally puts them into a depression. It brings out a bad consciousness, not an ideal, per the values of having good as better and bad as negative feelings as bad. DNA changes and mutation. And so the reason why this actually becomes important is because viruses, I just got over a flu. When you deal with something like that, it's actually merging into your DNA and it's changing my DNA. And so who I was a week ago, my collective consciousness is slightly different before my flu than it is now. Why? Because the virus went into my cells and changed my DNA. And my immune system got most of it, but those viral changes in my DNA have happened. And not all those cells were bad, but now they have virus DNA. They have some, that's what viruses do. It's a weird thing. I mean, one of the interesting questions about this would be like, where do viruses come from? Because they specifically modify the DNA of what they infect. And those modifications can actually deliver benefits in time. Most of the time, it's this weird sort of thing. Like, it's threatening the existence of a life form, but it's also kind of preserving itself by attaching to a life form. And there are questions of like, is this rogue DNA that's trying to replicate itself and bind to me like the pod people? And it's doing this intercellularly, and it's doing it on a fractional level again. Again, I have 1,000. Well, now 999% of me is me, and I have that little one that's now viral DNA. It didn't kill the other part. It just turned 1,000 to 1,000 plus 1. And so it's 1,001 now. But 1,000 is me, and that 1 is not. It's viral DNA. 1,000, my DNA. That little one that just attached itself to my DNA is now my DNA. So now I'm 1,001, right? And so those things have an effect, right? The thing is that it's so complicated. It's so mind-blowing because how much of an effect, we're introducing variables on a scale that probably quantum computing would overload with. And I don't mean like in the big picture. It's in the little picture. And knowing that if you added just this little, I'm going to name a little protein on DNA because there's strands of double helix protein. And it's double helix when it unheats. But if I unleash the strand of adenine, an extra strand, adenine, cytosine, I think is what bonds together. I can't remember exactly. Forgive me if I don't. But that actually changes the way that DNA is read. It's very small, and it might not. It's like misspelling the word to. Instead of TWO, I do TOO, or I do TO. I'm able to get the basic meaning, especially in context, but now it's not the same as it was before. And so when we're looking at things like a collective and all these little pieces, all the little pieces start to matter more and more. And what I want to present this as is like dominoes. If you took dominoes and you look at, like, you have this whole room, we can make the a big area, like maybe an acre full of like this mural of dominoes, that if I tip one, that one will eventually cause them all to fall down, right? Now, that actually could work in reverse. If I had something that actually pushed one up, it could actually push them all up, right? And so with dominoes, that's not really possible because of gravity and physics, but with the way our bodies work and the way that things encode. So, and it's again going back to this picture, right? The ripple can actually go either way. And so we're going to draw another ripple. I'm going to draw a telemetry ripple. And it's a bad telemetry ripple. Give me a second. But this is a heartbeat, right? In the QRS complex, this up and down here is the beat of the bottom chambers of your heart, the bottom pump of your heart. The P wave is the beat, the squeezing of the top part of your heart. And so over time, what I end up doing is I see a pattern repeating cycle. And so can that change within a scale? And so if I'm excited, well, now my heart rate's beating fast. That's usually classified as above 100. Am I in the same consciousness, excited, as I am in a calm consciousness? No. Did something trigger it? Of course, right? So stuff. Can there be situations where I can't get out of it? Of course, right? So the idea, and I guess the understanding about this, the thing could be really interesting if this could be pinpointed, is that I could push on something very inert by putting, I don't know, like one little like colony of bacteria in my stomach, and actually making me successful because it changed the dominoes to where I was able to. Well, that, I think that jump sounds like rather extreme. I probably should explain it more. When we're looking at consciousness and we're looking at how we think, right? A lot of times people look at action as the reason, and environment, right? And this, so is that, were you born this way? Is it in your genes? Kind of both. This is the eternal psychological study, or the eternal psychological dilemma. What happens is that there are things called catalysts, and catalysts can kind of force a response. They'll make 1 + 1 = 64, right? And so the way that I think about something has an effect on whether or not it can happen, right? They call these ideas like self-fulfilling prophecies. This is a huge part of confidence, or not confidence, consciousness. And so if confidence is kind of the next thing I'm getting to. If I approach a task confidently with the belief that I can get it done, I increase my chances of getting it done, right? If I marry that with ability, well, now I take something that wasn't likely to happen, a house being built, because a house doesn't build itself, and I turn it from something unrealistic into a certainty. Now, if I looked at actually the way that I approached things and the way that my life existed in that same regard, a lot of times when people are successful, It's because they believe they can be successful. There's a book called The Secret, which was for the most part like almost looting people. Um, and it's looting them because it was making it seem like the only thing that mattered was wanting something to happen. And if you wanted something to happen, you could manifest it in reality. And that's really not true. You can have a bunch of gasoline, it doesn't mean you have a car. It's when you marry the two together. If you give fuel to the vehicle, well, now you can go somewhere. And so, again, like the idea of actually being able to inject something, affect something small, and just like throwing a rock in the water, I throw the rock in the water in such a way the rock has a certain density. I'm putting just enough that I get the ripple that I want, whether it be a gentle ripple or a giant wave. That would be the outcome of this sort of thing because I could affect my consciousness because it's a collective, not directly, not just directly, but indirectly. But I can also better gauge the degradation, the diminishment of consciousness over time, because ultimately that's what death is. And all of us are going to die. This collective of cells and bacteria that are on me, some of them that are wanted and some of them that are not wanted, we're all racing towards an end. We're like on a lifeboat together and we're working together, forming a singular identity. And that thing that we're on the lifeboat from is death. When all these cells stop working and we just become biomaterial again. And all these cells that work together, they die. And these communities and these generations of billions of individual cells working together that are all committed and similar, but different enough that they could be on their own, autonomous enough, and not indefinitely because couldn't sustain them, but maybe because if you look at something like a blood transfusion, right? I mean, that blood is part of that somebody. How long does it linger? I mean, bone marrow, which is what makes the blood, they do those transfusions. That'll change your blood type. It'll literally change what you are. Kidney, you could live in somebody else for quite a time. But all those things are affecting and changing who you are. So something simple, like I know it's kind of simple, but it's kind of complex. But with kissing, we're actually comparing. Well, one of the scientific theories behind it is that we're actually testing the bacteria that we share and their compatibility, and also assessing immune systems with a kiss. That some science actually believes that that's how that evolved. So these thoughts, the pieces of them leading to the whole, the collective becoming the singular, that is actually like the weight and the epiphany that I was having, right? I mean, so all these little pieces about how these things relate to each other, I think that that's relevant. I think it's really interesting to think how certain parts of my body affect my consciousness in very specific ways. I think that it's really fascinating to think that this collection of cells are actually forming a singular persona, and that singular persona is always changing depending on which ones are alive and which ones are not, and which ones are invading and which bacteria and microorganisms are invading and which ones are helping, and how I survived, how that is affecting, right? How age, how these energy fields around me, like radiation and gravity and cellular deterioration, which is causing DNA changes, how these are actually changing fundamentally who I am. And we don't think about any of this. We tend to just be very straightforward and just accept that this is singular and this is my identity, when actually I think thinking about all this casts all of it in doubt. I mean, like for me it does, at least, because it's so much more complex than the simple story I gave it. And the simple story is the easiest, most accepting thing to believe, but it's also what's the most not true, because the reality of it is mind blowing. It actually is almost headache inducing, confusion inducing. Um, just wanted to talk about it, like the things. I mean, for me, it was a really interesting like journey. I think the reason why I had that is because my brain kind of went into shutdown from being sick, and I've been like thinking about these things and accumulating the pieces, and kind of as I'm awakening out of this kind of suspended, subdued state so that my immune system can fight off an infection, I kind of woke up with a kickstart. I woke up with a kickstart, and some of these things that I had been puzzle pieces, I had the energy and the insight to put the pieces down and kind of complete the thing. And again, came up with this symbol of like these hierarchies about, the collective. And so this black line would be the middle ground, right? I mean, like but this would be like homeostasis working. This would be it, like, so this is living and this is dying, right? I mean, you can create analogies, but it's just basically mirroring one process into another. And we have that wave like rhythm with that, right? This up to a down, to a up to a down. I show what breathing looks like on a wave. But usually healthy breathing looks something like that. You should have the same wave kind of, and it'll speed up and it'll slow down. But again, we see this peak and a valley, right? And it goes to a point. Now again, if it goes past this, like it shuts down, if you get too much entropy and you deviate, you get away from the homeostasis. So if we get too much of not living and we have shut down the staying alive, then that's death, right? I mean, and ultimately that's what's happening. It's like we're constantly running out of steam, and so just have to think about what this does to me. In conclusion, is that it makes me realize that the most important moments that we ever have are the now. Those are the only ones that are really really relevant, is the present. And the reason why is that the past is done, the future is yet to happen. And so anything that you want, if you look at it for tomorrow, it's not going to happen. The consciousness needs to be now. And just like anything else, like we took one like change, right? So we adjusted the population of illegal immigrant bacteria, the infectious ones. Well, there's a point in which it's like the domino, it pushes it over the edge, and now I'm escalating into overwhelming. Well, likewise, in reverse, there's a point in which the immune system wins, and it's now escalating towards health. So think about that and think about behavior. Changes are not sudden most of the time. They're not like bolts of lightning, and arguably that can happen, right? I mean, it's not with the lotteries happen, game-changing moments happen. They just don't happen reliably enough to be meaningful, right? I mean, like it's out of the blue moon. One person wins the lottery, not 20,000 billion, right? So, and I know that's like an exaggerated, silly term. I'm sorry. Gradual things mean a lot, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at, the little things. And so if I was going to do something, like write a book, writing a book starts one word at a time. And if I thought of it as one word at a time, I could probably write a book. I have. But if you think about it as the whole overwhelming thing, it's too overwhelming to handle. But those little steps actually create the cascade to the bigger ones. That's the end of my thought. Hopefully I seem coherent and not nutty. One final thing is that this idea has been dismissed. I'm not the first person who's come to it. I think the explanations are a lot different, but it was visited in esoteric things. Esoteric is kind of like emotional, religious understandings. And so if we look at like religions that are not on the beaten path or even on the beaten path, they'll seek to find an emotional understanding. Excuse me, I'm still getting over being sick. And so that concept is called as above, so below. And it's basically that idea of mirroring duality where people are coming to the conclusion that, yeah, there's patterns in these things. Some of these stuff, it's not just, I know that that's just a tree, but it's following a pattern of growth that is happening that I could see in other things, right? I can look at the tree and I can understand something else. And that's kind of what that concept represents. But again, like when you make too big of a jump, if I do, okay, well, this cell caused this chain reaction, therefore Buddha. It doesn't it doesn't add up, right? I mean, like this domino fell, then this domino fell, that's why there's Godzilla. I've made too big of a jump. And that's the thing is that like the steps matter. And I know that it's so dynamic. The variables are so way out there that it's hard to have patience with that. But that's the truth of it. I mean, if without seeing and directing where everything else is going, where all those pieces are falling into play, you just have a mess. You don't solve a puzzle. That's the end of my idea. Hope you guys have a good day, and hopefully I didn't seem too. Again, it's like madness, and epiphanies like madness. It's glad to have it, and it's letting me know that I'm feeling better. Bye.